Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I want to talk about something that I've been seeing this comment quite a bit over the last, I guess almost a week now, and that is, why don't Daryl or Carol ever mention Rick at all? Or even Michonne, right? Why don't they mention Rick and Michonne really ever in terms of what is going on with them? Because obviously for Daryl and Carol, they believe that Rick is dead, but also they sort of got some proof recently, or not proof, but yeah, there's some stuff here that I want to get into. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. Now, obviously, after the finale, I think, everyone's attention right now is on Dead City, but they never released a trailer yet, so we're sort of on trailer watch for that show, which, the show's coming out in spring, I'm assuming in March, but it could be April or even May. It's going to be somewhere around there. I don't know if they would push it off until May. If it is going to be that long, then yeah, we'll probably have to wait a little bit for a trailer, but the one thing that I will say is that 2025 is going to be a really awesome year for The Walking Dead, just because if you really look at the content overall and where the story is going to go for Dead City Season 2, that trailer that they released for it looks absolutely incredible. That show looks so good, and it's 8 episodes as well, so I think that that's going to be a return to form for The Walking Dead. And then Season 3 of Daryl Dixon looks incredible. That trailer that they released, of them in Spain and where they can go with the story here, it looks absolutely just amazing. So I think that 2025 is going to be a lot better than 2024, which I'm really excited for, because I think that, and that's the one complaint that I've seen a lot, is there needs to be a lot more Walking Dead, and next year we are going to be getting a lot more Walking Dead. And also Gimple has been talking about, or he mentioned at New York Comic Con last month anyways, that they are sort of working on some stuff right now, so things are in early development, it seems like, for a new spin-off. So next year we could get an announcement of that. So I think that next year is going to be a really awesome year for The Walking Dead. This year I wasn't the biggest fan of what came out for The Walking Dead. I think it started off very strong, but for most of the year it hasn't been the most exciting until really now. I feel like now we're in a place where you can start to build up a really incredible story. I'm really excited for Daryl Dixon Season 3, which is where I want to talk about this aspect to the show, which is the whole Rick Grimes, or I guess not mentioning Rick Grimes in the show at all. It's been a thing for a while where characters can't mention Rick's name, and it is frustrating. If you look at Judith and RJ, in season 10 of The Walking Dead, they would refer to their dad as the brave man, which again, just dialogue like that is very, very cringy. I'm not a fan of that dialogue at all. And so when you have lines like that, it's not an amazing moment, or at least I'm not a fan of it at all. Honestly, it just comes across as cringy dialogue that I think most people don't like. And so I think just referring to Rick as dad, or even just mentioning the character in terms of what that storyline is, they haven't been doing that. And what I'm referencing here is Daryl's search for Rick Grimes. Now, when he left the Commonwealth at the very end of The Walking Dead, he left to go and search for Rick, but the way they did the story in that very last episode, it wasn't really like he was going out there to look for him. Obviously there was references to that in the dialogue, but they just didn't say his name, and I think they could have explained it a lot better. I think that just not mentioning exactly what Daryl is doing, I guess he was out there searching for Rick, we do get that, but when you go to season 1 of Daryl Dixon, the very first episode I thought did a really great job of explaining why Daryl went to France. When he got there, he was talking on the radio and he said, I want him to know that I tried. And I think mentioning things like that, that's fine. I think that in terms of that dialogue, that works, right? Because I think that's what a person would say is I just want him to know I tried. Obviously it's referencing Rick. We all know that. And it really seemed very direct to Rick when he said that. I think mentioning Rick there actually probably would have been a bit too obvious. If Daryl was I want Rick to know I tried. That's too, I think, to the point in a writing dialogue like that anyways. Obviously we all know what he means when he says I want him to know that I tried. And I think that the very first episode set up this really great story where Daryl was out there trying to find Rick, and then eventually got into some trouble and then ended up in France, right? And so as soon as he's there, he's talking about where Rick is, this and that. I like all of that. That makes so much sense to me in terms of, yeah, that's why he was out there, right? And so all the scenes before when he was, at that mechanic shop and then eventually ended up on the ship, he's not going to talk about Rick. There's going to be no mention of that. I think that towards the end of the season, it also makes sense as well that he wasn't really going to mention Rick a lot, because the story at that point was all about, Daryl. He was trying to get home, but he wasn't going to explain his whole backstory to all the characters there. So it makes sense. You're establishing a new story, everything. I totally get that. But where I do have an issue with this is in season 2 of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, where there's really no mention of Rick at all. And when you really think about it, Carol knows that Daryl went out there to try and find Rick. Now, when Carol and Daryl found each other, obviously a lot of stuff was happening, but they had a lot of time to talk about a lot of stuff. And if you think about it, why didn't Carol ask Daryl, like, did you find any clues on where Rick could be? You know, like, there was no mention of anything regarding Rick. Like, that's why Daryl went out there, you know, to begin with. And obviously he ended up in France, and there was a bunch of stuff that they were dealing with at the time. But it just makes sense that Carol would probably ask about something like that, because I think most people would. Most people would ask, like, did you find any clues on, like, where Rick could be? Or, like, did you see anything at all? It's literally an easy scene to do. Like, there was so much conversation happening where, you know, Carol could have said something like that, and then Daryl was like, no, I didn't really find anything at all. You know, I ended up here and whatever. And then move on. Like, something like that would just help everything feel so much more connected, and we would know that there's an overall goal of reuniting everybody. And there was no mention at all. Like, they talked about Judith and Connie and all of that, which is fine. But again, like, even in that scene there, like, there should have been a mention of, like, did you find anything on Rick? And also, the craziest thing about this is, like, maybe they don't talk about Rick as much because they sort of believe that he's dead. And I get that aspect to it, because it's been years and years since they've seen him. And obviously the last time they saw him, it seemed like he died, right? So I totally get that. And they probably believe overall too that, you know, he could be dead, right? But why don't they ever ask about Michonne? Like, why don't they ever wonder about where she could be? Because she just left, right? Like, I feel like the writers are forgetting about the overall character's story and, like, their mindsets on, like, you know, where their family could be. Because they're all, like, the Walking Dead family, right? Why aren't they wondering, like, well, where's Michonne? Because she left a long time ago. You know, like, I feel like Daryl would be wondering about that as soon as Carol, you know, maybe, like, not right away, but as soon as Carol and Daryl, you know, had some alone time to talk about whatever, why didn't he also mention, like, oh, did Michonne ever make it back? Like, did she ever find anything? Again, that's also something you can mention in a scene like that, where Daryl can ask about Rick, or Carol can ask Daryl about, like, you know, did you find anything? And then he'd be like, no. And then Daryl would ask Carol, well, did Michonne ever make it back? And then she would say no. And then maybe, you know, Daryl's like, well, you know, like, she'll find him, or she'll be all right. Like, she's got this, right? And just sort of that classic Walking Dead, just belief in, you know, survival, and, like, everyone's going to be fine, right? There's so many things here that I have issues with in terms of this overall story. And I think that's what really felt off about season 2, because when you look at season 1 of this show, honestly, really incredible. I think they did a really great job overall in terms of, you know, connecting it with Rick and doing what they had to do there. Like, I think there was really no issue there. Obviously, I have some complaints about how they handled it on The Walking Dead, but I think overall with the spinoffs, they've done a really great job. I think with, you know, Dead City, that's really interesting, but I think the reason why that show, for me, I don't have issues with it is because of the timeline. Like, that's set 5 years into the future, so it's possible they already reunited, or maybe they just really don't know at this point, right? Because, you know, Maggie was at the bricks for a long time. She could have been really focused on, you know, setting up this community. She maybe wanted to just, like, detach herself entirely from the Commonwealth. It seems like that's what she wanted to do, right? Like, she's not even there at all. So I think that's probably what happened, and you know, maybe why she created the bricks, right, was to actually get away from the Commonwealth. Like, there's so much there that I think season 2 could actually get into. And then in terms of Negan, I mean, obviously he just never felt wanted by anyone there, so that's why he left and he was gone. So it's possible they never really even heard of anything, right? That's fine for me. Like, that I totally get. I just think that in terms of Carol and Daryl's story and this overall, you know, search for Rick, that's what they were trying to do originally. And also Michonne's out there. Like, I feel like the characters should wonder more about what's happening there, right? Like, is she okay? Did she ever make it back? And I feel like the reason they never really want to make these connections is because I think they don't want people thinking that, oh, they're just going to mention Rick, because obviously that's an easy way to get people very excited about the show and everything. And it almost makes them, you know, in a way, like, if they are thinking that, obviously, and this is just sort of my opinion on that, but I think that it almost makes it so that, you know, they go in the other direction where they don't even want to mention Rick at all, and they'll come up with stuff like the Brave Man and stuff to get around it. And I think that that's an issue with it. You know, like, they don't want to mention Rick, like, they don't want to connect it that much with the story, and I don't really understand why. Like, I think fans understand that the story is completely separate. Like, what's happening in France, or I guess what happened in France, and what's now happening in Spain, it is separate. It's a totally separate thing. And I think people are okay with watching that story. Like, it's honestly a really incredible story. The France storyline was awesome until it wasn't towards the end, but that's more of an episode count thing in terms of pacing. Spain looks like it's going to be a really great refresher for the show, so I'm excited for that. I just think that overall, in terms of connecting everything, you got to mention these things. That's where it really builds up the excitement, and it reconnects us with, the group that, we had in the very beginning. And it makes it feel like there's this overall storyline happening, from like season 1 of The Walking Dead. Because the thing is, there's going to be all these arcs, France, Spain, there was the Commonwealth beforehand, there's stuff happening in Manhattan and New York City and all that. There's going to be other spin-offs and everything. I totally get it. There's all of these stories, but the overall story of The Walking Dead is our group surviving. And I think that that's where you want to end all of this at some point, right? In the next like 4 or 5 years, is you're going to have everyone reunite, and there's going to be like this final sort of goodbye to everybody. They're all going to reunite. There's going to be, it's not going to be a happy ending, obviously. I think some characters will die. It's going to be absolutely insane to see like either Daryl, Carol, Maggie, Negan, Rick, or Michonne. Like, I'm sure one of them's going to be gone, right? There's no way the story's going to end with everyone surviving, everyone happy. Like, it's The Walking Dead. It never happens like that, right? So one of them's going to die. It's going to be a really insane scene, and it's going to end everything here. It's going to be our goodbyes to all the characters and end this overall arc where you can watch The Walking Dead in season 1. You can see how they all survived together, how they all got separated and reunited, and then whatever the ending's going to be. It's this overall story, and then you can start the whole next generation thing if you want to do that, because obviously they're probably going to do that. Like, they don't want The Walking Dead to end. And then at that point, if people want to stop watching, that's totally fine. They might find a new audience. I'll probably watch the new show because I'd be interested in that, like the next generation. What if they jump forward 30 or 40 years? Or like, that's what I would hope they would do anyways. Like, not even focus on like Judith and RJ, but focus on like 2 generations after that, or the generation after that. That would be kind of cool, just to see, a different state of the world, and then you would be wondering about what happened with, some of the other characters. And so, there's a lot of places The Walking Dead can go overall in the future, but in terms of this storyline right now, I think it's just really frustrating to see Daryl and Carol never really mentioning Rick. And it's obviously, it comes down to the writing and stuff. And I think that, it makes sense because David Zabel's kind of writing what he's writing. But again, I think Gimple just needs to say like, well, like, you have to sort of include this mention of Rick, or at least in this episode here, we got to sort of, connect that moment there, or do something like this. Like, I hope that in season 3 they do something like that, because it makes sense. I think you need to have a lot more of a connection here. But the one thing that I will say in terms of some of the issues with season 2 is that they filmed season 1 and 2 back to back. And I think that could have been an issue for season 2, because they filmed season 1 and pretty much at the same time they went right into season 2, which is really weird, I know, because we had to wait so long for season 2, but they filmed season 2 pretty much right away. At some point in season 2, they had to take a break for a little bit, and then they came back to film everything. I think that really, caused a lot of issues overall for season 2 in terms of pacing and how they handled all the story and all that. So any of the criticisms that we're saying right now, like, they haven't really had the time to take a lot of that into consideration for season 2, because they filmed it back to back. And so I think for season 3, they are filming right now. I'm sure they've seen a lot of the criticism over the last like month or so, and that's stuff that they can work on right now for like later on in the season, and we'll see where they go for like a season 4 and all of that, right? So I'll have to definitely mention that in my review overall for season 2, because I'm going to be doing my season 2 review this Sunday coming up. And I'm really excited to do my review here for season 2. It's going to be a pretty big review because I want to go through everything here, all my issues that I have with the show, and also a lot of stuff that I do like, because there was great things about season 2. It's just that I think I focus a lot more on the negative because it's just frustrating. I think because of all year in terms of how they've handled The Walking Dead, it's been very frustrating, because I think it's so easy to make this whole universe, this whole world so exciting, but this year specifically, they haven't been doing anything. Like, it just feels like, I don't know. But obviously, in terms of where things are at right now for season 3 and for Dead City season 2, I think they are going to start to take a lot of the criticisms that we have and actually making these changes here, because that's always happened in the past, right? Like, whenever people criticize certain things, it doesn't change right away, but usually like the year after or something, you'll start to notice a lot of changes. And so, yeah, but I'm going to leave it here though. Definitely post your thoughts down below. Why do you think Rick is never mentioned on the show? And why do you think Carol and Daryl didn't talk about that at all in season 2 when it seemed like, it made sense to actually bring Rick up? Post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.